You've spelunked into the Matt Cave.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, another quiet week for Utah sports, but Diego Luna did start for the U.S. men's national team in their game against Turkey. I will talk about how that went. Also, BYU made some news recently about the direction of their men's basketball program. And then some NBA draft news, and it is only going to have to do with the Utah Jazz. I'm not going to be talking about pretty much anything else. I'll also be talking about Yegor Demin and what people are thinking his ceiling and floor is going to be in terms of like player comparisons. So I'll talk about that. And then Summer Game Fest happened this year. It is the annual summer video game showcase that kind of is supposed to replace E3, but hasn't really filled the shoes because the developers like Sony and Nintendo both don't do anything there. Sony has their State of Play that they did pretty much around the same time, but it wasn't during the same conference. And then Xbox is doing their showcase later today as I'm recording this. So take all of what I'm speaking about with a grain of salt. I will report back to you all next week on what Microsoft announced because there are rumors of a new Halo game. There's going to be an update on the new Gears of War game. So Xbox and Microsoft are doing some things. They are making moves, but I don't know if those moves are going to do anything to move the needle. So I'll report back next week on the Microsoft showcase that they're doing. Anyway, as always, please rate, review, follow, like, subscribe, wherever it is, however you're listening. Leave a comment, whatever. It doesn't matter what it says, really. It could say a bunch of gobbledygook, and that would still appease the algorithms that run our lives. So please take a second and do that. You all are amazing and have done that for me, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. Now, you can follow me on Facebook, The Matt Cave Podcast, YouTube, The Matt Cave Podcast, all one word, and on Instagram as well, The Matt Cave Podcast. So that's where you can find me, and if you want to email me, themattcavepod@gmail.com. All right, so let's get into it. The U.S. men's national team faced off against Turkey in a friendly in, there's going to be the Gold Cup later this summer, and then there's a couple of friendlies against Turkey and Switzerland that the U.S. are playing, all to gear up for the World Cup that happens next year in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. And right now, things are not looking great for the U.S. men's national team. 9 of the 11 players that started for the U.S. in their knockout round game against the Netherlands are out for this summer. Christian Pulisic, Anthony Robinson, Serginho Dest, Weston McKennie, Timothy Weah. Let's see, Matt Turner's playing, but who else was on that team that I can't pull out of my head right now? Yunus Musa. There's a whole bunch of them, but they're all out due to either injury or rest. And in terms of Christian Pulisic and Weston McKennie and Timothy Weah, I get it. They play in the top tier of European soccer. And I'm not saying top tier like the top league. They're playing for the top teams in European soccer. So, Christian Pulisic's playing for AC Milan, and he's thinking about making a move back to England because he's not liking the direction that AC Milan is going with the coaches. And then Weston McKennie and Timothy Weah play for Juventus, one of the best teams in Italian soccer. And Yunus Musa also plays for AC Milan and might need to consider a move away because he just isn't getting playing time. And then Serginho Dest plays in the Dutch. It's called the Eredivisie. It's the Premier League of the Netherlands. He is on the best team there, PSV, and so is Malik Tillman. So our players are playing in the top leagues for the top teams. It's not and Johnny Cardoso is making a move in Spain to a top team. So everywhere these guys are getting run, and they're actually playing for these teams. It's not like Matt Turner at Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace where he just doesn't play. He's a second string goalkeeper that can never push for top team reps. He was the second string goalkeeper at Arsenal, and then it's just gone downhill from there. So the team if it were fully constructed and had everybody available and everybody fully healthy, this is a top 15 team in the world. This team that they have for these games this summer, not great. Not great. Like, the best player on the team is Tyler Adams, and they don't want to overplay him because of his injury history. And I am sure his club in England is saying, don't play him too much. And I kind of agree with that. He's a very solid defensive midfielder, holding midfielder, is the guy that will cover for mistakes when he can. A captain-type player. And he was the captain for the U.S. at the World Cup. So, looking at this team, a 2-1 loss to Turkey is not as embarrassing as ESPN or The Athletic, NBC Sports would have you believe, because Turkey was playing their A team. Turkey was playing their best players. This is like the C team for the U.S. because Tyler Adams didn't start, Mark McKenzie didn't start. Mark McKenzie plays in Europe. Haji Wright didn't start. He plays in Europe. But Patrick Augimeng started, Jack McGlynn, other guys that you've probably never heard of, Alex Freeman, Max Arston, Matt Freese. I mean, these guys are not household names, and they're not even household names in MLS. So, other guys that started, Chris Richards, he plays for Crystal Palace, who won a trophy this past year in England. Not easy to do. Luca De La Torre plays in Italy. Diego Luna, obviously, plays for Real Salt Lake, but not for much longer. Once that transfer window opens, he's gone. And Malik Tillman, he plays, like I said, for PSV. So, this team could have done well. Jack McGlynn scored a wonderful, wonderful goal 60 seconds into the match. It was fantastic solo play, and Diego Luna created space for him by making a run. Like, I was very impressed with that whole setup and shot. That shot was wonderful. Off his left foot. It was great. Then the rest of the game happened. So Diego Luna created 4 chances that led all players on the pitch, everybody. So he created the most chances. He was subbed off in the 65th minute for Quinn Sullivan. So, I mean, that was probably prearranged before the match even started. But other than that, the U.S. men's national team had no teeth. And then late in the game, they had a wonderful chance to tie it up. A perfect cross from Tyler Adams, and our striker just headed it straight to the keeper. It's just more of the same when it comes to our strikers. Like, they can't score. I don't know what the problem is. Oh yeah, one name I forgot to mention and who's missing, Flo Balogun. Like, he's one of the better strikers in Europe. So, yeah, we're missing a lot this summer. So this summer is going to be about depth, and if anybody can impress Pochettino to the point where they're going to get serious play time next summer during the World Cup. We'll see. But overall, it was not a wonderful game. Sure, Turkey won. Fine. I mean, there's not much to take away from this game. Player ratings, if you subscribe to those, it's 1 through 10. Obviously, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. Diego Luna scored a 7. He was tied for second best on the pitch in a game where nobody got above an 8. So, overall, not great. Below average, I would say. Next game is against Switzerland on Tuesday. And if Switzerland is bringing their A team, this will probably be another loss for the U.S. I'm just going to say that. Because this is just not the U.S. team that is going to be representing the country next summer. Did you get ready for that? But Diego Luna looked good. He did. He was all over the pitch. He was running hard. He was creating chances. Wonderful. So I think if he has one more game where he's like this and he even slots away a goal, he's on the team. He's on the roster. All right, so let's move it right along to BYU men's basketball. And they signed Kevin Young to an extension. Now, nobody knows what terms were agreed to. Nobody knows how long. Nobody knows how much money. Because BYU is a private university, they are not required by NCAA bylaws to release that information. Other schools where that's a possibility would be like Notre Dame, TCU, Stanford. They're not public universities, so they don't have to. Now, what this means for BYU is they could be jumping the gun. They really could be. I understand that it was their first Sweet 16 run since Jimmermania, and this is the best recruiting class that BYU has had in their entire history. So that's all true. It's one season. But the landscape of not just college basketball, but college athletics has shifted in a way that nobody could foresee 4 years ago. So the House versus the NCAA lawsuit that was going on for years has finally come to a close, and the judge has ruled in favor of college athletes. So colleges will begin paying their players starting July 1st. Why else is July 1st a great day? Not only is it Canada Day, it's my birthday. So that's a really good date for a lot of people now. So colleges will now be able to publicly disclose and pay their athletes. Good news for a lot of universities, bad news for smaller ones. Utah State, not great news. Utah, their boosters, historically have very tight purse strings. We'll see if that changes. But there is a cap, a salary cap almost with this ruling where it's $20 million or something. And that's across all sports. That's not just for football or just for basketball. So colleges will have to decide how to divvy up that money, which then the boosters with the NIL stuff come into play. Because that's it's almost like baseball where, well, it's not even like baseball. It's tough to describe because there is that salary cap for the colleges, but there's no salary cap when it comes to NIL. There's a bunch of lawsuits out there right now that want to put a cap on NIL. We'll see if that happens. That goes against the free market, so that would be un-American. But I'm not here to talk about that. So there's that $20 million cap for all sports, and then you have your NIL and boosters who also will be paying. It's realistic for a school like BYU that has big backers that want to spend money on this sort of thing, have already spent that money on AJ DeBansa and this college basketball class. If you look at the college football class that Kalani Sitake and crew are bringing in, you can see the money being spent there as well because it could be the best recruiting class in the history of BYU football as well. If people don't flip or anything like that. And that's a possibility, right? Nothing's set in stone when it comes to recruiting anymore. So this is a big deal. And Brian Santiago, the new AD who has taken over for Tom Holmoe at BYU, kind of saw this coming, and I know Tom Holmoe did as well, because Tom Holmoe was the one that started the negotiations with Kevin Young. Brian Santiago kind of wrapped them up, and I'm sure Tom Holmoe was in the room when this was all happening. So this is a solid play for right now and for the immediate future. What happens, though, is what if, the other shoe drops and BYU drops to the bottom half of the Big 12 in both football and basketball? Because let's not forget, they signed Kalani Sitake to an extension last season. So he's around for a while, too. That's a lot of money. And in the state of Utah, we don't like spending money. Other than these boosters for these programs and Ryan Smith, generally people don't like to spend money here. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. It's really good. I like seeing the colleges and universities in the state of Utah being aggressive when they see talent and locking it up, much like the University of Utah did with Coach Morgan Scalley. After this season, I am 95% certain that Kyle Whittingham is going to hang it up, regardless of how the season goes. I think he's out of steam. He doesn't like the direction college athletics is headed, and I'm sure he doesn't like this salary cap sort of thing that has now been introduced into the college scene. He's old school. So we'll see what happens there, but Alex Jensen and the University of Utah men's basketball team will be going into this next season as the worst team in the conference. And that's not just me saying that. That's like Yahoo Sports, CBS Sports, ESPN, even like the recruiting websites that I follow. The worst recruiting class coming in, which means it's being matched up with one of the worst rosters so if the purse strings don't loosen up at the University of Utah, that college men's basketball team is just going to be not good. And they shoveled out a lot of money for Alex Jensen. So Just because you got the coach doesn't mean you're going to get the players anymore. That's not how this works. You got to pay to play. So that's where we're at. But BYU, good stuff, signing Kalani Sitake and Kevin Young. They also signed Lee Cummard for their women's basketball team, who has already made inroads with a couple of solid recruits for the women's basketball team. The other tertiary sports at BYU are doing very well, like cross country, women's soccer, even baseball is on an uptick. So it's kind of a golden era for BYU. It's interesting where all this is headed. I'm very excited to see what happens, and I'm going to keep tabs for all of you on this as well. Keeping in the basketball theme, let's go to the NBA draft. Two things I wanted to bring up. First, Yegor Demon. So Yegor Demon is being mocked to go in the 10 to 15 slot area of the NBA draft. So the Jazz basically have no shot unless they want to overdraft and get him. I have another thing about the Jazz here in a little bit, so stick with me. Yegor Demon is being predicted to be like Josh Giddey on the court, not off the court. I'm not going to bring up what happened with Josh Giddey before, but you'll get that joke. So Yegor Demon on the court like Josh Giddey, high end. Low end would be Kyle Anderson. If you remember Kyle Anderson, he was a very good defensive guy and a good creator. He just couldn't score. And if you watch Yegor Demon for the first half of the college basketball season, you'd say that's a very fair comparison. So that's where he's slotted to go. About number 11 is where ESPN has him going to the Trailblazers. I don't necessarily agree with that because the Trailblazers already have Scoot Henderson, so that's not great. But let me talk about what ESPN has the Jazz drafting. They have the Jazz drafting Jeremiah Fears. Jeremiah Fears is a point guard out of Oklahoma. He's not very big, and he doesn't shoot well. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, that's Isaiah Collier. The Jazz already have this guy. It's not who they're going to pick. ESPN has no idea what's going on in the Jazz front office. And so they just mock random guys to them. And it's very infuriating that ESPN just ignores entire markets. This kid can't shoot, okay? He's 18. And so if the Jazz make this stupid pick, it's all about the upside. It's all about his raw, and I hate this word when it comes to drafting in any sport, the intangibles. You know who else had the intangibles? Cody Williams. Already he's being viewed as a bust, and I agree with that. He could not make it onto the roster until the Jazz were actively tanking, and even in the G League, he was not tearing it up. So this is just, oh boy, this is not good. It's not good. Because looking at the draft, and if it goes the way that ESPN says it goes, and to be fair, ESPN has been right about the past few drafts and how those picks have gone, BYU needs VJ Edgecombe to fall to them. Or they need to trade up and get him or Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey would be the premier one. And there is a lot of smoke around Utah bundling up a bunch of picks and Lauri Markkanen to go up to as high as number 2 with the San Antonio Spurs to get Dylan Harper. That would be ideal. Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey would be ideal. Dylan Harper is by far and away the number 2, and in any other draft, he would be the top prospect. Obviously, Cooper Flagg is the prize. If I am the Ainge family that is now running the Jazz, I would be throwing a Godfather deal at the Mavericks and saying, hey, you said you had a three-year window. Cooper Flagg is not going to help for the first year and a half of that. You know who will help? Lauri Markkanen, Jordan Clarkson, and then once that 3-year window closes that you yourself publicly said it would happen, you'll have all of these draft picks afterwards to rebuild your roster. That's what I would do. Because they get Lauri Markkanen, all-star player, matches up very well with Anthony Davis. And then you get the instant offense of Jordan Clarkson off the bench. And hey, why not? Let's throw in Colin Sexton. And as the Jazz, we'll take back your bad contracts. You give us a couple of second-round picks and this number 1 overall, we're going to take it. And then you have this window where you're going to be hyper-competitive in the hyper-competitive West. In this window that the Mavericks themselves have said they have 2 to 3 years to win in. That's why they made the Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis trade. I mean, obviously if I were the Mavericks, I'd say no. But that's about what the Jazz could do. I would be on the phone every flippin' day. I was like flipping and sleeping every day with the Mavericks, just hammering down their will. And just be like, hey, all right, we've updated our offer. How about Colin Sexton in this? Oh, hey, we've updated our offer. How about we take back some contracts? Oh, hey, here's a new offer, a couple of more draft picks. How about some second rounders as well? Like, I would do that every day with the Mavericks until they just go, all right, fine, yes. Just stop calling. If that doesn't work, be on the phone every day with the Spurs. And if that doesn't work, every day with the 76ers. Bundle it in. They also get the number 5 pick. I mean, just Godfather it. Do it. Because the fans are already done. One season of actively tanking and the fans are already done, which is very scary for a small market. And, I mean, you could say it was like 2 full seasons worth of tanking because at the All-Star break, the 2 years previous to this past one, they pulled the plug and they got rid of a lot of veterans that were helping them win. So, that's what I would do. But if the Jazz stick at number 5 and like the best player available is Jeremiah Fears, trade out of it. If there's a team that wants to trade up, trade out of it. It's not worth it. To get another developmental kid that's not going to be anything, it's not. Because look at this final paragraph. I'm just going to leave this with everyone here before I move on to video games. The final paragraph of this mock draft projection for Jeremiah Fears is exactly why the Jazz should not take him. Fears' major flashes of talent leave room for optimism, but there's a somewhat wide berth of outcomes given all the variables that need to go his way to become a star. That is not what the Jazz need. So, if this is the best that's available, or Trey Johnson is available, or Kaman Maluach is available, no. Trade out. Get out. Get out. Even get out of the draft at that point, or drop down to like number 10, and then draft like a Yegor Demon, who is at least a big guard. Because for whatever reason, the past few years, the Jazz are allergic to big guards. Allergic to them. They don't want them. They're back in the early 2000s where it was Allen Iverson and Dwayne Wade. Like, give me a break. Now, the thing I said about earlier that I would circle back to with the Jazz is they have fired 2 scouts. Reportedly, this is reported by SLC Dunk, who has been right in the past. They have fired 2 of the scouts who were pounding the table for Cody Williams. So that is why I said Cody Williams is already being viewed as a bust. The guys who were pounding the table for the Jazz to take him are now gone. They've been fired. That was like the first thing Austin Ainge did. So, great stuff, Jazz front office. Holy Moses. All right, on to happier things. Summer Games Fest 25 happened this year. Jeff Keighley's he does like 2 like big shows every year. This one is supposed to replace E3, and then he has this video game awards show at the end of every year that's like the Oscars of video games. It's a very good production. They do a great job, and especially the video game awards. I encourage everyone to watch it, even if you're not into video games. It's a really fun award show. So it's good stuff. I mean, Jeff Keighley does suck up to certain people in the industry, Sony in particular, but then he also sucks up to Hideo Kojima, the guy behind Metal Gear Solid and now Death Stranding. He's also a big suck up to the Resident Evil team. So you can tell that he lends a lot of time for that. But if you can kind of look past that, it's a good show. It really is. So, the Summer Game Fest. I was not really looking forward to it, and it snuck up on me this year because there's just nothing coming out that really catches my eye. And I went over it, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. It's a Grand Theft Auto effect. Nobody wanted to come out later this year because everyone assumed Grand Theft Auto 6 was going to launch in September. And every other video game company wisely looked at that and went, we're not going to compete with that. And it's not a good idea. Well, Rockstar, 2K Games, and the Grand Theft Auto team all said we need more time, which is fair. I am always in favor of a game getting pushed back for polish, bug fixes, anything like that. I'm always in favor of a game getting pushed back. I'm always in favor of it now. When I was younger, I was like, this is stupid. Just launch the game and then you can patch it later. Wrong. I was dead wrong. Get it right. Get it as right as humanly possible when you launch. And if there are little foibles on the side that need to be fixed, you can fix them later. But games recently, I went over it already. I'm not gonna beat that dead horse. All right, so was there anything at Summer Game Fest that caught my eye? That was really what I was going into, looking at everything that was going on. And what caught my eye was the same thing that caught my eye at the Video Game Awards at the end of 2024. There are a lot of Souls-like games. And if you don't know what a Souls-like game is, it's like Dark Souls. Huge, epic boss fights, difficult game. You are going to lose these fights, but you learn from them. And then once you beat that boss, you get a sense of accomplishment because you achieved something. There's a lot of games like that. Code Vein 2 is basically anime Dark Souls. That one got announced. Another one was Mortal Shell 2. That was a 2020 release, Souls-like action RPG. That got announced. It's a lot of that style. But then there's also like 2D fighters making a comeback and top-down either shooters or action RPGs in the Diablo-esque sort of, I guess, style. But one that really jumped out to me was Mouse PI for Hire. And if you all remember back to the Cuphead game, back when I was on the now defunct Level 22 podcast, and even in the early days of this podcast, I was very geeked for it because it is in the animation style of old school Disney or those 1950s cartoons. This one is much like that. It's black and white, and another big reason why I'm not going to say super excited, like I'm never going to pre-order a game again, but if I were to pre-order it, Troy Baker, he's in the highest echelon of voice actors, is lending his voice to the main character and hero, Jack Pepper. So that kind of lends a little credibility to the game because they have that big name. Now, that does not always mean the game is going to be good if they get a big name voice actor, but it helps. Other games that really I perked up and paid attention to, Onimusha Way of the Sword. It's a samurai action game, and there's new monsters that were announced, so it looks interesting. It looks a little too Souls-like for me, though, but it did catch my eye a little bit. Felt that boxing looks like a very silly and just fun game, and the reason I bring it up is it's a cross between Jim Henson-style Muppets and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. That's what it looks like. And I just went, that could be pretty fun. Other games that really I paid attention to, Dune Awakening, they showed us more of what's coming when it launches on June 10th. Lego, I think it's Lego Party. It's basically Mario Party with Legos. Those always do well. Mina the Hollower is another one I wanted to bring up. Now, Mina the Hollower is, I think it's either the second or third game by Yacht Club Games, and they are the minds behind the brilliant 2D side-scroller, platformer, Mega Man-esque Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight is one of the best indie games to have ever been released, and they are following it up with Mina the Hollower, and it looks really good. It does. It's like a Game Boy Color-esque style of animation, just like Shovel Knight was, and it's coming out on Halloween. And if you want to try it out and you have PC or Steam Deck, you can get the demo on Steam right now. Other than that, though, nothing really perked me up. There's Scott Pilgrim EX, and if you ever played the original Scott Pilgrim game, it was a fun side-scroller beat-em-up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles-esque game. And then there's a 007 Hitman crossover in Hitman World of Assassination that a lot of people were geeked up for. Mads Mikkelsen will be reprising his role as Le Chiffre from Casino Royale. And so he's your target as Agent 47. So that could be interesting if you're into that sort of thing. I'm not. And then the big reveal that they always do at these Video Game Awards or Summer Game Fest, Resident Evil 9 or Resident Evil Requiem, as what it's called. I'm just not into Resident Evil games. I'm not into zombie games. But this was the big announcement. It got the biggest roar at the conference. It got the biggest reaction from streamers. It got a meh from me. So that was the big news from Summer Game Fest. So overall, underwhelming, but it was underwhelming for a reason, because of the Grand Theft Auto effect. And I went into this a couple of episodes ago, but the Grand Theft Auto effect essentially was like the World of Warcraft effect in the early 2000s, whereas like, all right, we need to plan our launch around this game because nobody's going to buy our game for a solid 6-month window when this other huge game launches. So that's what's happening this year with video game launches. Obviously, later this year, we've got like Borderlands 4 that I talked about last week that I'm looking forward to. EA College Sports Football 26 this summer. But other than that, for me, there's not much on the horizon. Another one that looked pretty good was Wu Chang Followed in Feathers, which is in the same vein of Black Myth Wukong, Chinese studio. It looks interesting. I don't know if I'll get it. I got Black Myth Wukong, but I haven't played it yet. So we'll see. But overall, kind of underwhelming. And I just thought I'd talk about it. But that's the episode this week, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. And I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.